Hey everybody, day 14. Wow. So my course is coming up in a couple of weeks, I guess, a couple of weeks from tomorrow. And I've got about 10 days of lives left, 12 days of lives left. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for sticking with me. Today I'm going to talk about a quote from Wayne Dyer. Conflict cannot survive without your participation. There's a bunch of things that I think about when I read that quote. Conflict cannot survive without your participation. So one thing that I think about, for those of you that have been watching the lives, you've heard me talk about the 5 styles of conflict resolution. And so the first place my mind goes to is those 5 styles. So again, it's compete, avoid, collaborate, compromise, and accommodate. And I think about, the idea that one of the first things that you want to do when you're presented with a conflict is make a decision about what's the best style to use here, what's the best approach for problem solving. And sometimes avoid is the best approach. They all have their merits. They all have their times when using that style is the most appropriate time. I think about a situation where maybe you don't have a relationship with the person, maybe the situation is not that important to you. And I often share this story. There was a time when I would engage in that. If I was walking down the street and someone said something to me that I didn't know, I might actually engage in that, right? And it wasn't that long ago, maybe a year or so ago, I was downtown and there was a woman who was sitting by the side of the road, and she had some things that she was selling, and I wasn't interested in buying any of her things, but I thought I'd be kind and polite and just smiled at her and said hi, and she said, "Fuck off." And there was a time when I might have engaged in that, and I might have been like, "I'm just trying to be nice. What's wrong with you?" or whatever. But this time I was like, no, I don't think I need to engage in that. I think I'll just carry on with my day. Um, so sometimes avoid, yeah, that's the way to go. Some people, you've heard the saying, "Not my circus, not my monkeys." If it's a workplace situation where maybe there's 2 people that are in conflict and it's not got anything to do with you, but sometimes we engage anyway, right? Maybe because our friend is part of it and we want to back up our friend. So these camps start to get created and it escalates into more of a team conflict than perhaps it needs to be. A lot of the times people, we avoid because we're uncomfortable with conflict, and in those situations where avoid is not the most appropriate style to use, where relationship is there and is important, and where the outcome is important as well, those are not the times when you want to avoid. You want to engage in a way that's effective, and if we do avoid in those situations, it can escalate to that place of, the camps get created. Trust is breaking down. We're making negative assumptions about other people's intent. We're villainizing, and it's that snowball effect. And so, that's not the time you want to avoid. But what can happen, in terms of just this quote, "Conflict cannot survive without your participation." So in those situations where avoid is the most appropriate style, and you avoid, it'll just stop right there usually, right? And it's very difficult for someone to carry on when you're avoiding in that situation where it's appropriate to do so, where there's no relationship and the outcome doesn't really matter that much to you. I also think about, our attitude, in conflict. When something happens and somebody says something, does something that doesn't work for us, that makes us feel like maybe our needs aren't going to be met, our own sort of participation in conflict can spiral things. and when I say participation in conflict, I mean as opposed to participation in, say, collaboration, right? A lot of the times we think of conflict, it's a negative thing. It's not something that feels good to most people. I tend to think of conflict more as differences of opinion, but most people think of conflict as something that's yucky and doesn't feel very good. And you know, with regards to this quote by Wayne Dyer, conflict cannot survive without your participation. I'm gonna use the definition of the yucky conflict. So if you approach it in a way that maybe you start to pull in some of these things that I'm talking about, different attitudes towards conflict, if you can start to see conflict in a different way, if you can start to think about conflict as something that doesn't have to be yucky, but that can be something that leads to innovation and strengthened relationships, then I would say you're not participating in that the yucky conflict thing. Maybe you're participating in something different, right? But you can, with your attitude, you can exacerbate things. You can take it to that place of yuckiness, and other people can do that as well, of course, right? The people that are egging you on, saying, I can't believe he said that to you. The cheerleaders, for those of you that watched that video last week, you know, so I would really agree with Wayne in terms of conflict not being able to survive without your participation. But I would also say that when you choose avoid when it's not the most appropriate style, that without your participation, conflict can actually escalate. And so you want to make sure that when you're avoiding in a time when it's actually appropriate to do so, because otherwise, you know, you're actually letting the conflict pile up and get bigger and get to that yucky stage while you have your back turned. If you want to learn more about how to address conflict in those early moments and not avoid in those situations where it's not appropriate to do so, don't forget I have that free guide on my website. If you want to go to collaborationschool.com, you can download that free training guide. It's got a little bit more information there. And also for those of you who are considering taking the course and you want to have some discussion about whether or not it would actually be a good fit for you, again, I'm offering those mini conflict coaching sessions, just a half-hour call where you can tell me a little bit about what are the sorts of conflicts that you're managing, and we can talk about whether or not the course actually would be a good fit or not. So I'll post the link to signing up for that underneath the video, and I've got some tomorrow, but I'm also going to add some next week as well. So thanks for watching. Have a good day.